Hello and welcome. This is my first YouTube video, and I'm happy to have you here with me. Today, I will talk about React Hook Form and building React forms in a maintainable and scalable way by taking into account how multiple people would be working on a larger time scale on various form components. So I will not just show you how to use a specific API or a specific part of the React Hook form library or something like that. I will also talk about what makes code easy to maintain and easy to understand for a team composed of various developers with different skill levels. So if that is something of interest, stick around. If you have any questions, leave a comment. And if you enjoy the content, consider subscribing and liking this video. I am sure is going to help me out a lot. Okay, having said that, let's walk through what we'll build today. Today, we will build a sign-up form, a simple sign-up form initially, and step by step, we will extend its functionality to add more features and more capabilities to it and discuss why we're placing various features and functionalities in different layers of the architecture. Now, in order to provide us with an architecture that we can use, basically a project to build the form into, I've set up a boilerplate, if you will, Next.js application with Tailwind and a component system that I haven't used before, just for the heck of it, because I want to explore and learn new things while I'm recording these videos. So having said that, we'll just jump into the code. We'll take a look at the starting point, which I intend to share in the YouTube comment or like description below the video. And I'll just get started. I'll start building the form and walk you through what I'm doing and why I'm doing the things that I am writing on the screen. So before we get into the Next.js project, let's quickly take a look at the final result. We have the sign up page, and on it we have a simple form. We're not able to submit anything unless the form is valid. If we add a valid information, we are allowed to submit. So if I make sure that I have the same password, I'm able to register, and I cannot press the register multiple times, so it's only going to happen once. Now, the backend is mocked. It doesn't remember anything. There's going to be a couple of edge cases that we will hardcode into the sign-up API and see how we handle that. So, for example, if I were to say Bob and press and send the same password in, I'm gonna get a different error from the server where the server is telling me that this email is not available. So we'll talk about server-side error handling as well as client-side error handling. So let's talk about the starter project. It's based on Next.js. It's not relevant that it's based on Next.js because I'm only using Next to have file-based routing and to be able to talk about the application layer. If you don't know Next.js, don't worry about it. You'll be able to follow along just fine. Apart from Next.js, I'm using Tailwind. I've just set it up, and I'm adding React Daisy UI as the component framework. Now, this is the new component framework that I'm using. I've never used it before until this project. So if you have any opinions on it, let me know in the comments below. So far, I've had a good experience with it. I might use it in one of my projects. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's what we're going to use. And I think I'm going to add the link to this documentation in the description of the video as well. Let's take a look at the folder structure and what we have in the project. We don't have much. So we have two boilerplate pages, one that just has hello world, which is going to be the home page, and the sign up page, which will contain the form, but right now it has absolutely nothing. There's some configuration for Tailwind to work, and there's this API file that is not relevant to what we're doing. It's just going to have some edge cases. I think right now I have one of the edge cases that we will tackle, and I'll probably add a couple of other edge cases as we continue to build this form. So having said that, let's actually jump into it and let's start building our form. Let's start building some of the inputs and the button to submit the form using the component system that we have. And let's start centering everything on the screen, because right now the sign up form starts right here to the top left, and we probably want it to be on the center area of the screen. So if I add a little bit of CSS right here in line, because this is not really the point of the video. We probably have better ways of centering things, but for now I'll just place it right here. We're going to have columns, we're going to have some spacing between the elements and so on, and everything is going to be on the center and it's going to be full height. So right now we should be fine. Okay. And let's see how we might add an input. Now, I already know how to do this, and since the topic of today is not how to use React Daisy UI, I am just going to start copy pasting some code and walk through what is there. So we'll start off with an input, which has a color theme, it has an ID, and it has a type, which should be imported from Daisy UI. And let's see what we get. All right, that looks acceptable, so I can start typing in and things work fine. Let's also add an input and maybe a wrapper before the input, so we have this form field-like entity on the screen. So I can add an input for the email with the class label and so on and so forth. And I also need to wrap this into a div. So I'm going to wrap it like so with a div. All right. Now I think the email should be correctly positioned at the top. And if I click it, I should be able to focus the field. For helper text and errors, I think we need to use another label or something like that. Let's go ahead and do that really quick. So I think I can just paste in a span which has a label text and then text error, and it should work. And by the way, I know all those classes because I checked them in the docs. You can go into the React Daisy UI docs and see how those would work. But in the interest of time, I'm just gonna skip over some of those parts which are not very relevant to what we're trying to achieve today. Yeah, so if I were to see an error, this is how it would look like. So here's the point where we actually get started with the form implementation. Now, if you are a developer that has to work and implement and deliver this whole form, you probably start thinking about how you're going to manage the values of the form, the errors, the state, basically the internal state of this component before you send the data to your server. And this is the point where React Hook Form steps in and helps us a lot. Let's start adding React Hook Form onto the page. And we'll start by actually looking at the docs and exploring this wonderful library, which I totally recommend you give it a try. Even if you don't pick anything else from this video, this is really, really worth your attention. So it's easily installable, and afterwards it just gives us this hook, the use form, which will contain pretty much all the API that we need in order to work with initial values, resetting the values, errors, submission, reaction to changes, binding to other types of components which are more complex, not just inputs or selects and so on. It is a really great library, and we're going to start using some parts of the use form API right now. So I'll just copy over this initial use form invocation, and I will paste it onto the page here. And of course, I need to install React Hook Form, so I'll go ahead and do that. npm install, and what was the full name? React Hook Form. So, all right. It's type safe. It should come with all the type definitions that we need. So now I should be able to import it from React Hook Forms, and we are ready to get started. Now, if I want to use anything from the React form, I need to bind some of those values onto my my content on the page. And let's start off with the submission. How might we enable this use form hook to tell us that we're ready to submit the form with whatever data we have there? So that's like the simplest form that we might have. Let me get rid of that as well. Well, we have this handle submit, and if I hover over it, it doesn't help me too much. It says, you know, it's a very specific type that we have right there. But I know that this handle submit can be used when a form is being submitted to intercept the default HTML behavior and to allow the React form library to intercept it and basically perform validation, do additional checks, react, set some sort of states like flags for submission, validation, and so on during that time. If I have an onSubmit right here, and of course this needs to become a form, I am able to just pass it this handle submit, and then onValid is the function that will get called if everything is all right in React Hook form. So basically, if I have this function right here and I log whether or not I have successfully submitted the form, I should be able to, oh, what's going on? I should be able to have the first link between React Hook form and our code base. So let's see how that might look like. If I name this from div to form, it's gonna be fine. Let's see what's the complaint. From, not from, form. Yeah, so it's gonna be form. And what do forms need in order to be submittable? They need a button. So let's add a button called submit and see what this gets us. So we're gonna go back into our screen right here. I'm gonna show the developer tools because we have an onValid console log there, and if I click submit, I see that that code is running. So yay, we actually have handle submit integrated, and the first touch point with React Hook form has been achieved. Now, what about the values that we are submitting? Let's see, are we actually getting something here? So I'm gonna say we're getting probably some data of unknown type. Let's log it and see what's there. If I press submit again, I see that, you know, we are submitting a form without any values, at least from the perspective of React Hook form. Now, how do I tell React Hook form that I have values inside my form? Now, it would be great if by some miracle, not necessarily miracle, but a little bit of magic, the React Hook form would figure out that I have an input with an ID of email, and it might use this information to capture the value that I place in this input, but that is not the case. We have quite a simple API, however. We have this register API that we can use. We use it like so. We send over an object by spreading it. So register returns us an object with a couple of values that are supposed to work on inputs, select elements, and so on. So I can register a field of type email right here. It's not going to give me an ID. So if we hover over, we'll see probably, or like control click a couple of times, we will see that this actually returns on change, on blur, a ref, super important, a name, min, max, and so on. So it basically giving us some input props automatically onto the field. Let's go ahead and see what's happening now. So if I press submit, now I actually see an empty email key, which is great because we've just made progress. But what if we actually want to type in some values? So let's use this value and see if it actually works, and it does. So magically, anything that we type here is now captured by React Hook form. Now, it's super important, and this is actually something a little bit elusive, but it's super important to note that If I were to console log here a message like sign up page running render function, we might notice something interesting. Of course, it renders the first time, but as we type in the email input, there is no additional re-rendering or CPU cycles allocated to the sign up page, even though we're updating the input. What does this mean? Well, this actually means that the input is uncontrolled. So it's actually quite important and something to keep in mind. It's more performant this way because we are not going to be asking React to update or to check if there are updates to the entire form every time we type something into the field. Now let's take a look at how we can hook simple field errors from React Form into our UI, because React Form also handles validation errors in a very nice way, actually. In the form state, we actually have an object called errors, and I'll just go ahead and log this object entirely. And here for the email, I will say that it is required, and we'll see what that gets us. So I'm just gonna save that, refresh the page, and when I press submit, we will see that sign up page is running the render function and that we actually get the required type. And there's a message as well. They're saying, you know, nothing. And if I want to add a message, I think I can send the string here. Email is required. Let's see if that does the trick. And it seems to be working fine. So this means that our red span, red label here, can become the actual text that we get in the message if the errors email object exists. So this can become a ternary operator where we have errors.email. If this exists and it has a message, let's show that, otherwise let's simply hide the input altogether. So now if I load the page initially, I don't see any error. If I press submit, magically I have the error on the screen. It says on error. Let's quickly fix that. Let's add the actual error message in here. Okay, I'll just cast it to string, and we'll revisit this just a couple of minutes later when we're gonna impose some type safety over the error messages and over the fields. So for now, I'll just say, you know, I'm pretty sure the message here is going to be a string because I'm only setting it as a string. It can be anything else. Let's see if this works. So I'll refresh the page, submit, and email is required, and it's working just fine. Now, let's extend the form by adding the password and the confirm password fields, and maybe start to talk about the separation of concerns a little bit, because right now it's the first time where we're going to repeat ourselves and we might see something worthy of a separate component. So if we go into the code base and we want yet another field, we have to duplicate this whole thing. So we have to do two of them. One is going to be the password. So I'll say password, and I'll say password is required as an error, and the type is going to be password. It's going to be the same thing for confirm password. Email here is going to be confirm password, and everywhere else we're gonna change it to that. Oh, and also we need confirm password as the field here, because we're gonna do a register for confirm password, and we're gonna have a password field like so. So let's go ahead and do all that. Let's see if it's working. So we have password, confirm password. When we submit, we see validation errors for all of them. I'm not going to worry too much about how consistent the messages are. We just see that they're working. This is probably an easy one. You probably already are screaming in the back of your mind, we need to have a reusable component for this. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just copy paste this entire div. Let's go into SRC. Let's make an SRC folder so we have everything nicely organized. This is going to be a reusable component, the text field or something like that. So I'll make a components folder. And I'm going to type it properly, components, and inside it will have a text field.tsx, export text field. Like so. Input that, and now we need to start to pick the parts that are going to come as props and the parts that are going to be here in the form. So one of the things that is definitely prop based is the ID and the label of the field. So I'm going to start making a interface for the props. I'm going to say, you know, this text field gets props, and one of the things is going to be the ID. I'm not sure if this is required. I think it could be optional. I might be wrong. Maybe we'll change our mind. Also, there's going to be a label. It's going to be a type string, and I think we will require a label. So let's go ahead and replace those. It's going to be props.id, and this one is going to be props.id. So I think we need the ID if we want to have this binding. Otherwise, HTML4 is going to be undefined, and we might have multiple IDs called undefined. So let's go ahead and do that. And this is props label. Now, another easy one is, I think, the error. So let's abstract away the error message, maybe as an object or a string. Let's go with a string. Error is a string, and it is optional. So unless I send an error string, I'm not gonna show the span with the error message. So it's gonna be props.error equals whatever this was, and this is a string. I know for a fact this is a string, so I can do that. Now we're left with this register, and this is one of the things that, at least when I'm teaching React, I find in the submissions from my students. Some people send the register function as a parameter, and I think this is wrong, because if we send the register as a parameter, we basically upgrade the text field from being a completely reusable component to a component that only works with React form. And that is not necessarily the case. Maybe we will have a text field that has absolutely nothing to do with our form library. So we will probably need to move this out of our component. Yet we would still need all the props that are coming from here to be sent over. So one thing that we can do is we can define the object called input props here. So it could be props.inputProps, input props. For now, I don't really know what that will look like, and I know it's probably going to be optional. And if it's optional, maybe we can have a linear operator like so there. Now, what's the intended usage of these input props? Well, we're supposed to send the register like we did for normal inputs from our form. So instead of sending the register as a parameter, we send the result of the register as a parameter. That way, we don't need to know about React form into our reusable component. So let's do just that. Let's import our text field really quick onto the sign up page and place it at the top like so. And see what we need. So we need ID, label, and we'll take it from there. So I'll say email, label, email, and I think I can just, oh, not that, that's the password. I think I can remove the email field entirely, and let's see what we get and what's missing. So if I refresh the page, we have the email, it works. Oh, it's like a password, it seems. So something to keep a note for the future. And we get no email, which is bad. Why? Because we never called register for the email. So let me undo what we had there and see how we might pass this in as the input props. So if I say input props is whatever we got there, I think we should be fine, right? So let's refresh again, press submit. Almost there, almost there. So we are getting the email. We are getting the email error, but we're not sending the error back to our usable component, and we're not seeing the message on the screen. And if we were to add something like gibberish there, we only get errors for the other two, the password and confirm password. And if I press submit, it looks like I am okay. I have access to the value from my input. How might we send the error message? Well, we already have the error key here, so all we need to do is pass this in. So it's going to be email, and this is going to be a string, and that is it. Let's see if it works. So I'm going to refresh the page, press submit, and voila, our message, our error message gets printed on the screen. Now let's also allow either text or password fields to be rendered by our component. So let's go and extend the props to accept a type, which is of type string. And if type exists, we're gonna set it as so. Otherwise, it's gonna be text. So by default, inputs will be text. And if we want passwords, we'll go ahead and submit, send the type as password. And let's see. So now the text field should be fine. And if we want to have a password field, all we need to do is replace this. And we should be fine. So password is required. And in a similar way, I think the text field could be used for confirm password as well. Okay, we just need to take care of the camel case thing for the register. So it's confirm password in one single word. Otherwise, it might not work. And then these two are confirm password. All right, and let's see if this works. We refresh the page, we press submit, things are looking good. Now if I type in some information, oh, password and confirm password seem to be problematic because they're not hiding their input. So we can say type is password right here. Now, just to be a little bit more elegant and restrictive, let's only allow password or text or maybe phone number or whatever was the other value that is available for type. I'm not sure if phone number is actually part of the HTML spec. Anyway, let me know in the comments below. So now we won't be able to do something like bananas here. Yeah. And we should be good to go. So email is with text, and then password and confirm password are hiding their content like we would expect. Now, there's one extra thing that we can do for the text field, and that is to force the input props to be something that is returned from the register. Because right now it can be bananas. And we don't want that. We would like TypeScript to complain saying, hey, you know, you're not supposed to send us that. You're supposed to send something that is similar to what the register returns. And we actually have two options here. In a way, we can take the TypeScript definition from the register function and send it over. But if we do that, then our text field needs to import types from React with form, so it's no longer usable without it. So I'm basically talking about the unknown from the input props. Or we can just define it and duplicate basically the type definition, which I think is probably the better solution here. So I'm just gonna follow along the type definitions and find something that is contained in the register returned object like this. And I can go and place it into the text field. So let's see what we're working with. Okay, so probably be like so. And this is probably a function. And this is also a function. And they usually have events. And I think they're optional, all of them. So that ref callback is from React. Field name is actually a string, and so on and so forth. And let's see if we are allowed to use the text field with the new definition. So it's complaining that ref callback is supposed to take a type, so it's not generic. It's going to be an HTML input element. I mean, that's what we're going to use the ref on. We're going to use it in the end on an input, and this input component itself will have a ref, and that ref is going to be of an HTML input element. It's a little bit more complicated. I know usually these things happen very rarely on the project, and depending on the effort, you might do them or not. I would prefer to have them because this way I am not able to send something that is invalid here, so I cannot say something not good equals true here, and I'm gonna see an error saying, hey, you're not supposed to send this key onto the object. So it's a little bit more safety, a little bit more consistency in the code. Wow, time flies, and it's actually getting dark in here, so I will actually turn on some more lights. Let's see if that helps. Yeah, this should be better. So we have our form, we have some super basic validation, and we're at a point where we can submit. Now we can go two ways. We can either look at the submit function and how we link to the backend, or we can take a look at how we work with the validation, because our validation is quite messy and incomplete. Let's focus on the validation first. So we would like the email to actually validate that the input there is a valid email or looks like a valid email, as well as the password and confirm password. We might want to take a look at the content and make sure that they are the same thing. Furthermore, there might be a requirement to have a minimum amount of characters in the password and maybe a maximum, or something like it has to contain at least a special character or a caps uppercase character or so on and so forth. In order to address all these validation concerns, we're going to use something called a schema. Now, schemas, if you don't know, are objects that define constraints to validate or check other objects or arrays. So if I have a schema that says, I am going to expect an email and a password and a confirmed password, and the email must be of a specific type, and the password must have at least 5 characters, that entire definition, that schema definition, can be used on top of what we get right here. So if I were to submit a semi-valid form, if you will, I can use that schema over this object and get errors, get validation errors from it. In order to define schemas and run validation logic with schemas, we're going to use something called Zod. Zod is apparently a character from comics as well. Oh, the bad guy from Superman, actually. Did not know that. Interesting. Anyway, Zod, the library, is a TypeScript schema validation things. So it allows us to define how our form should look like in an ideal valid state, and it will tell us if the current data that we have is valid, it respects the constraints that we have defined with Zod or not. So it's pretty easy to grasp. There are other variants. So other alternatives. There's Yup, and there's also Joy or something like that. So if you want to take a look, there's also Yup from NPN, and I think there's a Joy or something like that. But that's more focused on the backend. So Yup or Zod are just great for schema validation. So I'll just go ahead and install Zod, and I'll start defining how our schema will look like, and see how we can integrate Zod with React Hook Form. So I'll quickly install Zod, npm install Zod. I don't think we need anything else apart from Zod in order to have the schema. So I can import Zod and basically get everything that's inside the package, like so. And then I can define my sign up schema as almost like a component, if you will. Of course, not actually a component, but similar in concept to a component. It's on the declaration part of things, not on the instance side of things. So I'm not going to instantiate a new schema every single time I render the form. I'm going to have it kind of like a component and only use it when I need to. Now, if the if the object that I want to create has a specific shape and it's actually an object, I need to specify that like so. So I can say z.object, and it has a specific shape. It has an email, and that is a string. And I think it's also an email. And that's pretty much all I need to do in order to specify that object that I want to validate with this schema must have an email key that is of a type email. Then I have password. Password is again a string, but this time I think I have a minimum of let's say 6 characters, a maximum of 24, and let's leave it at that for now. If you want, we can take a look at how we might add additional constraints for the password. So leave a comment if you like a video on that, like how we might require special characters or the existence of an uppercase letter or something like that in the password. But you're probably going to get the point by the end of the video on how to implement that yourself. And there's also the confirm password, which is of type Z string, and it has the same constraints. So we're not yet going to take a look at how we might validate the relationship between the confirm password and the password, just the individual fields. And now I can just take the schema, and I could theoretically validate the data right here in the onValid. So if React Hook Form says all good, we could take the schema and validate our data against it, but that is not the only thing that we can do, because React Hook Form already has built-in support for these schema. So we're just going to build that directly into our form. We can have something called a resolver right here, and we can either write our own resolver or use a Zod resolver, basically a binding between this Zod schema and React Hook Form, which will allow us to automatically validate the values from the form with the schema that we send over, plus bind and link all the errors that our schema validation will provide. So instead of us using the object here where we define the required or min or max or so on, we actually use the one that we defined in our schema. So let's see how we might do that. We will need the binding between Zod and React Hook Form, which is provided as a separate package. It's called @HookForm resolvers. I think it's resolvers just like that, not resolver Zod. and we're supposed to import, I think it's gonna be Zod resolver from this place. Zod resolver, like so. All right. So if the install finishes successfully, we should be able to just link these two together like so. So we're sending the schema to be used as the resolver of this form, and we can get rid of the validations from each register call. Right, let's see how this behaves. So let's go on to our homepage. Let's submit invalid email. So we're already getting something else, invalid email. What's that? Where is that error coming from? And then string must contain at least 6 characters. So we already see the Zod validation, the schema validation working and going through the same path that we created for our errors in our text field. So we're already integrating 3 entities. We're integrating Yahoo form, we're integrating Zod, and our component, which behaves quite well if you ask me. Let's see if we can actually force the email to also have a minimum size like so. So now I think we'll get a string must contain at least 6 characters. And so I'm not sure why confirm password is not working. So let's see what's up with that. Confirm password, that seems to be all right. Confirm, oh, so I had a typo, there we go. Confirm, confirm. Great, let's refresh, submit. All right, now we're getting the message, the proper error message on all 3 of them. But what if we want to check the confirm password and the password? What if we want to see how the values of those two compare and show some error message if we want to force the user to type in the same password twice? Well, we have 2 options. One of the options, and I encourage you to take a look on the docs if you want to do it that way, is to write another rule on the confirm password that then check the value of the first one. The second approach is to have individual constraints for every field and then constraints for the entire object. And this makes more sense in my opinion. So I would like to define a constraint for this entire object. So after every individual field has been deemed valid, I will check that the whole object itself has passes all the validity rules that I defined. So I'm going to define the password and confirm password validation as a concern of the entire object, not about not related to just one field or the other. And in order to do that, there's this refine method that we have with Zod, which basically gives us all the data. And we already see that we have 3 strings. So if I were to add a foo here with z string, I would see it in the type definition. So quite a good developer experience there if you ask me. And if this is not true, I would like to show a message, passwords do not match, where? On the confirm password. So basically on that field. And let's see what this does. So if I refresh the page and I submit, it's all good. Then if I start typing something that is not the same, notice that I see password do not match only if the confirm password passes the individual validation, but as soon as I start to have an invalid data for the field, I have priority and I show the error message of the individual field, not of the entire form. So that's pretty much it. So if I go ahead and reach the same value for both, I am able to submit the form only when both of them are valid. So if I type in something extra there and I press submit, you will notice that I do not have an invalid. I need to correct the error and then I can proceed and submit the form. All right, so we're at the point where we're ready to send data to the server and basically proceed with a successful submission or handle server-side errors. Now, in order to integrate the API, we have to talk about the separation of concerns again, because this is the next point, the next frontier, if you will, related to splitting code and keeping things in separate layers. It would be very easy to start adding a fetch call right here to a very specific URL. So I know we have a API/sign-up endpoint right here, which will simply says okay, or it will say you're not supposed to use this email if you're using bob@gmail.com. If we add this fetch call into our form, and let's say that this all up until now, this has been code exclusive to our sign-up form, the validation, the logic on the client side, and so on. If we add this fetch call here, then our form can no longer function without our running live backend. That is probably not great. Why? Well, let's say we want to showcase this in Storybook for other developers to adopt in various other flows. We won't be able to do that if our server is not running, and usually in Storybook you rely only on the client side to be available. It will also invite other developers to pollute the file with more business logic, application logic that is not related in any way to the form. The submission, the error handling from the server, and so on. The lack of internet connectivity is not, for example, a concern of the form. So it shouldn't be in the form itself. So I am going to move everything that we have so far into a different component, and then have this property, this callback, have this function be prop based. So have a property for the form to call when everything is valid and is ready to be submitted. So we're going to have basically one entity that only knows about the form, and then one entity that only knows about the data connectivity, where to which endpoint to make calls to, how to serialize and deserialize the data, and so on. From the perspective of the second entity, the one that knows about the API, how the form validates, how the form shows errors, how the form prepares itself to submit the data, to make the data available, is the detail of the implementation of the form component, not the controller or container component that knows about the APIs and so on. So that's what we're going to do next. And I'm going to go ahead and create a sign up form like so. This is going to be an application layer thing, while components is going to be a very usable, very dumb folder. So I usually have this convention where smarter components are either grouped together, or initially they're just there in SRC, and then they slowly move into more specialized folders. And this folder will have a sign up form.tsx, which will contain pretty much everything that's on the page. So let's start with that. Copy pasting everything. I am updating the imports. And yeah, the only thing that's different is the sign up page. So I'm gonna do export const. So I'm gonna use a named export because I want consistency for all the component names in the entire application. I don't want anyone to import this as something else, not sign up form. So I am super specific about that. And I'm going to imagine that I have a property for the onValid. I think we can call it onSubmitReady. Like, we are ready to submit. Here's the data. And we're going to send the data to the outside world. Let's do that as props, and actually we can just send it over here, so we don't need to do anything with the valid data in our form. We're going to allow the parent to handle that for us entirely. So let's clean this up a little bit. I'm going to remove that. Let's also add maybe a sign up header, because we're going to need that in a later section. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. The form will be completely concerned about validation and rendering, and the API will be handled somewhere else. For now, I will just add it here on the page. So I can remove everything else that's here. We don't need the schema, we don't need Zod, we don't need the text field, we don't need anything like that. We're just gonna have the sign up form, and when the submit is ready, we will do something with the data. Like so. All right. All right. Let's see if this works and fix any errors that we might have, and take it from there and see how we might integrate the backend API. So if I submit, I get the same result as before. If I pick some test data, we're good. And if I press submit, I am handle submit ready data. I see the log right there with the values that I have. All good for now. What about this handling? So let's take a look at the submission handling. Let's do handle submit. So it's going to be async because we're going to do an API call. And yeah, just that. So, all right. And data, now it's unknown, and send over the handle submit. So now, before we go into the API call, there's something that we can improve upon in the type definition of the onSubmit ready, and also on to the registers, the register call, because right now I can call any register I want. So I can say bananas again. Bananas is okay. But because I have this schema, I would like, if it's possible, to only allow these fields that are defined in the schema to be used by the register call. And we can actually do that, and we can do that quite easily thanks to Zod. So there's something called Zod infer, and it looks like this. And we can send over the type, so type of that, and this can become a type in itself, sign up form of values. Now, sign up form values, if I hover over it, you'll see it has email, password, and confirm password, the fields from here. And I can take this type and pass it over to this optional area of the use form. So this is, I think this is called the generic, correct me if I'm wrong. An optional generic, I'm not sure. So I can send that over, and now I am no longer able to say bananas here. It will only allow register to be called with email, password, and confirm password, which is quite nice. Furthermore, I can say, our submit will only send you this information, and we can see that the type safety is assured. TypeScript doesn't complain, because even the handle submit coming from the use form API is now type safe, saying, yeah, I'm only going to send over email, password, and confirm password, and nothing else. Which means if I export this sign up form values, plural, I can have type safety here as well. So now I can say something like email and have the certainty that I have that field available. So now I'm able maybe to do some sort of mapping or additional work on this object without fear of losing some fields or using fields that don't exist, and so on and so forth. So now I can do the fetch. I can do the fetch, and we know we have the /API/sign up. I'm gonna await it, and let's do HTTP response here. I'm not gonna use any library because I don't want to complicate things even more, so I'll just use plain fetch calls. Now we know this is going to be a post because that's how we send encoded data, encrypted data actually, because it's probably going to go through HTTPS or something like that. And we're going to send the body, and the body will be a stringified what? Well, we do not want the component password, so there's no point to sending it. We can just send the two, the email and the password, like so. Now, when we take the JSON response, we should log it, and I think it's pretty much done. That's all we need to do. I don't think we need to complicate things anymore, at least until we make the integration work between the backend and the frontend. So let's see if it works. If I do fake user one and you say QWERTY, let's try something else. I pressed enter and we got success true, and we have handle submit ready data. So we did get success true from the server. So let's click that and we see that we actually reached this point with success true, meaning our API sign up ended up here after a simulated 1 second delay. And now things are starting to get a little bit more complicated. You're probably already aware of this if statement. You've seen it. You've seen that we can also have a success false, and I'm sending over an object specifying the field and the error that I'm imagining would come from an actually well-built backend API that handles this kind of request. And the question is, how do we propagate and set errors that are sent from the server? How do we reason about them in our form or in our container on top of the form? And how do we get this message from the server onto the screen in the right field? Now, we have a couple of options, and from this point onward, we're gonna discuss things a little bit more, because now we're actually implementing more specific features which are dependent on the architecture that we adopt and the practices that we have in the project, and so on and so forth. Oftentimes, when I teach this to students, I see people setting a state here, set error state, and then if this JSON response success is not true, they would set an error state. So if this doesn't exist, we might do something like foobar or something. Anyway, and then they'll have a state here, state, use state, and then they will pass this state down to the form like so, and do server errors, and here they will define the server errors, and you'll have a specific API endpoint, and then here onto the page, because React Hook Form handles the errors, not our simple tags, they might use something from the React Hook Form API, or they might actually add all the way down here server errors. So I've seen this approach a couple of times with server errors, email or something. No, if we go down this path, we end up with components that know about the server, and we don't want our form to know anything about the server. Ideally, it should know only about the things that it controls, not about the outside environment. So if your reflex is to set the errors into the state and then propagate them through props, I understand, I kind of agree, but I also kind of disagree, and I will attempt to show you and convince you that there's a better way to do it. And before we continue, let's take a look at how we can set errors programmatically with React Hook Form. So we have something called set field error or set error. Let's see what it does. So set error takes a name and then an error object and then an optional flag to focus or not that field. And let's take a look at how this might be. So we can have something like a custom message. So we can set an error for this input of type custom and send over a message. So let's take a look at how this would work. I am going to go into our form. Let's comment those two lines out, and I'm just gonna attempt to set an error. Let's see, like so, and it's going to be on the email. It's gonna be a custom message on the email. So let's go and refresh the page and see what we get. We don't get anything because I think Zod will kind of override whatever we're trying to set here. But if we use a use effect just to see how this works, so on mount, if we have something like this, I think we will be fine. So we see the custom message. So that's how the practice kind of starts with people that have this approach. They see that they can set errors programmatically, usually in use effects or as a consequence, and so some sort of a synchronous action, and then they do the thing that is super hard to maintain in React. They do the ping pong or the domino between use state and use effect, and that is the mother of all evils. If we send this error state, these server errors, to the sign up form, and then we pass it in here, and then we start using this use effect pattern to react and to change the data onto the page, our components will grow in complexity to the point where it is a nightmare to understand and to maintain their code bases. If we go with this approach, there will be a point where server error exists and the UI, so the DOM, shows no error. Why? Because let's see what happens. The first time we encounter this error, the first time we set this error state, our main sign-up page or sign-up component updates. It passes the props down to sign-up form. This form renders without any error because we're not using server errors in the render method anywhere. And after it has rendered without anything, we're running this use effect. So for a brief moment of time, if we were to debug and maybe we have another use effect somewhere else and we take a look at what's available in the scope of this component, we're going to see server errors and no errors displayed. And this is very confusing, and we can do better. So I'll get rid of this use effect and I will attempt to stay away from all the ping pong and the set state and everything like that. And I actually have a challenge for you. So do you know if there is a way where you can send or set an error or something, do some sort of update in the child component without setting any state? So the challenge is you are not allowed to set any state, and I mean no state whatsoever, no state management, no nothing like that. You're not allowed to use React state directly in your application, but you are still supposed to make a change in the child. Do you think you know how you can do that? Leave a comment below if you actually knew before you saw my approach. So I'm just gonna comment this out, and I'm gonna add a console log here, and I'll say we should set an error in the form here. I'm gonna remove the server error, and I will attempt to keep everything inside this handle submit function, because this handle submit function could describe in a phrase or two exactly what happens with the submission of a login, of a sign up attempt. So if we were to implement a story from a sprint, if you're using Agile or something like that, the text in the requirements of the story would almost match one-to-one with the code that we write in this method. And that, in my opinion, is so much easier to maintain. So how could we change the sign up form? So how can we change the sign up form right here on this line without setting it new props, without context, because context also uses state and so on? How do we do that? There's actually a hook that people don't use too much. It's a little bit tricky to use, but it's super great and super strong in situations like this, when the parent needs to change the child in a super specific way, and we do not want to pollute the API props of the child. We would like the child to just allow an unopinionated way for it to be changed, and the parent to change the child whenever they see fit. Ideally, we should also avoid rendering cycles, so we should avoid setting a state in this parent component, because setting the state will run a lot of other use effects, or it risks running other things in there and complicating the flow quite a lot. If you don't already know the hook that I'm talking about, it's called use imperative handle. So let's actually go ahead and look at it. So we have use imperative handle. It takes in a ref and creates a handle, and it also has dependencies similar to use effect and so on. Feel free to skip this if you already know what use imperative handle is, and just see how we're running it. We're using it. I'm gonna spend a few minutes describing what it does, because a lot of people don't know it. A lot of people are actually stuck with use effects and state ping pongs, as I like to call them. So let's take a look at how this might work. First of all, we need to forward refs if we want to use it. So our form needs to accept a ref from the parent, and then onto that ref, it will inject, if you will, a couple of methods that are returned from the use imperative handle second parameter, which is a function. This ref will need to be type safe. We'll have to do some type safety for it. And then any method that is available here will be callable in the parent. So basically, here, if we have a ref to the form, so sign up form has a ref, and we have sign up form.current.sum method, if we want to have behavior in sum method or foobar, or how we want to call it, so let's do something like sign up form ref current show errors. Let's say it's going to be that method. If we want show errors to exist on our sign up form, and this would be sent here, we would have to define a use imperative handle, and inside this return object provide the show errors method. So I'm going to start over with this. I'm going to copy this use imperative handle from the docs. I'm going to place it here, import it, and for now I'm just gonna forward refs like so, without any additional parameters or type safety or anything like that. Close it. Now my ESLint will complain, of course. I will add a display name for our forward ref component, and now we are all good. Let's see what problem I have. So, okay, so we have some errors on the sign up page, but that's not relevant. What's relevant is that here we can have a set errors, or how did we call it? Show errors. Let's do set errors, and we'll see what we'll send as a parameter to show errors. And I'm just gonna console log whatever is here. So I'll do something like that. Let's see if this actually works. I am going to create a ref, not a user, a ref, and for now I will not worry about type safety. I just want to see if the console log actually works, and let's see if it does. So if we get to this error state, meaning if we submit the form with the error value, this one right here. So if we say bob@gmail.com, if we do bob.gmail.com 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6, and we submit, oh, we get a success true. That's odd. It shouldn't be success true. Are we really success true? That's interesting. What are we getting as a log? Let's see. Let's scroll all the way down. Oh, Apparently, we're not sending the email and the password at all, and that's actually an easy fix. This is specific to Next.js. If we make a fetch call and we send a body, and we don't specify that we are sending JSON, Next.js will not deserialize the body for us. So if I do here content type application JSON, we should be good. Let's see if that works. Submit. And still not working. That's odd. Maybe it's something else, not content type. All right, so the problem was a typo. This should have been application. That was an interesting 2 minutes of my life. Anyhow, now if I submit with bob@gmail, press submit, I should get success false. And as you see, sign up form, the code from sign up form here from the imperative handle has been triggered without setting procs, without editing state. So right now this code has run imperatively, hence the use imperative handle. It did not allocate CPU cycles for updates in React, which is actually a good thing in my opinion, because it avoids so many additional side effects with use effects and state and so on. Now, if we can get this set error and use it inside our imperative handle, we're pretty much set, because our backend already sends over the right type of information. It already sends over email as the key and a message about what's wrong with that particular object. I also noticed that we are sending over 2 responses, so I will do a return statement right here. All right. So let's see how we might get this set error to be linked to the content from the server errors. Let's console log what we have right here. So let's take a look at how JSON response errors looks like. I don't know what that was, but anyways, so I'm gonna allow JSON response to be unsafe from a TypeScript perspective, because we're probably gonna cast it or do some sort of validation anyway in real applications between these two lines. But yeah, let's take a look and see what we get. So if I press submit again, we get email not available. So if we send this object which is a record of type string and string, we should be able to map it to actual errors on the page, the same way we saw how we display a custom message for the email field in the previous section of the video. So as long as I send over these, I should be fine. Let's take a look. So set errors now should come here, errors, and this is going to be a record of type string and string. And we should be able to set errors. And since I know these are key value pairs, I can already do object maybe entries for errors. Then for each error, I would like to set the error, or maybe even better, let's take a look. Can we actually set multiple errors at the same time? No, so we have set error, and we do not have a set errors plural. So we'll have to iterate. Yeah, we'll have to iterate through them, which is fine. So I'm gonna call set error from React form, and this is gonna be what? This is gonna be a key and a error. So I'll do something like that. And that is pretty much it. Okay. So why is it complaining now, I wonder? Oh, it's complaining that key is of type string, yet we only allow email, password, and confirm password here. So now let's just see if it works, and then we'll take a look at type safety and make everything type safe, including this method right here, the set errors and so forth. So I'm gonna go ahead and refresh and pick again Bob, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, submit. Okay, 6 by the way. Okay, submit. Success false. Error is email is not available. It seems that we're not there yet. Let's see how this looks like, because maybe I'm making a mistake here. Who knows? Submit again. Error email not available. And of course it was a typo, so this should have been message, and this was I think it was values, or no, it was entries. And that's how it should be. Let's see if it works. If I submit, I get to see the error on the screen, and if I make a change, I am now no longer seeing that message. So we've just propagated errors from the server directly into the input field. We still need to make a little bit more efforts to make everything type safe, and it's not that hard, because all we do is we have this this API method exposed, so I can make another interface. It's going to be sign up API, which contains this method, and I think it's going to be like so. So we define the forward ref API first, and then the props in the forward ref. And now props is still sign up props. Refs, however, is sign up API. And all is good there. The only thing that we see as a complaint is the email, password, confirm password, the keys that we're expecting here. And I'm just gonna cast them, because this is not a TypeScript focused experience. It is something related to forms. Just say something like that. Of course, we could theoretically say that we do not accept any key unless it is one of those, but that just complicates things. And in the end, the object entries and object keys and so on will still need this type of casting for the key. So might as well just keep it here. And I think we can accept it as is for now. I'm going to make one more comment about this dependency array. Imperative handle, the hook doesn't figure out that set error doesn't change during multiple re-renders. So one thing that I like to do, and again, this is something that helps with the maintainability of code, and it makes your intentions more clear for other team members and so on. If you do not want to react to any of the changes for something that goes into the dependency array, so the linter asks me to add, in our case, set error here. If I know this function will not update ever, or it will not update because of set error, we can do another use ref, like so. And then set error ref current is this. And now instead of calling set error, I would just set error ref.current. And now the linter no longer complains, and my intent is very clear. My intent is to use this API externally, but I do not want to recreate it ever, and that happens to be the case. In this situation, at least. All right, now that that's out of the way, we can export the signup API and we can define it here. We can say that we will use the signup API. This is going to be the type of the reference. This is what our ref will have on itself when it is callable. And if we go and pass in the signup ref to our signup form, we see that the TypeScript system doesn't complain. The only complaint is here where we actually need to say, hey, you know, signup form might not exist. So now, if we get an error, instead of setting state and doing ping pongs and adding use effects and so on, we call an imperative API exposed by the signup form for parents of the component hierarchy. And inside the form, we just have this one small thing here, which will never re-render. It's not related to the rendering cycle. It is related to the programmatic API of our form. Now, if we refresh the page and we try it again, it is going to work as intended. It needs to be Bob. Yeah. Submit, and we see the message, the error message. Well, we are almost done. We are submitting the data. We're getting server-side errors. We have validation. I just realized right now that I have misspelled the sign, so I'm just gonna fix that and keep rambling for a little bit. There's only one thing left, at least from the first demo that I showed in the first part of this video. It's related to the submit button and how we might handle a mechanism for prevention of multiple submits at the same time. Yahoo has us covered in this situation. I think inform state is another flag called is submitting. And if we just check if is submitting, we can disable the button. So our handle submit receives an onSubmit ready. And if this is asynchronous, so let's actually type it as so. So we're expecting an asynchronous function. If it's an asynchronous function, is submit will be set to true while that executes. And only when it finishes, is submit will be toggled off. Now I'm gonna add a button that's already styled and has the condition for disabling. Basically, I'll just do is submitting, like hold up, and then it's gonna be submit again. So let's see if the flag works. And after the flag works, I will add the button. So we have hold up and submit, and it works. And if we want to use Daisy UI, we would use a button that looks like this, and we will have a sending and a register label inside it. So now we have this pretty register and we have a similar experience, but now we can no longer click it. And actually, yeah, so as soon as it becomes available again, after the submission has finished, we can click it one more time. But we cannot click it while it's disabled and sending. Now, finally, we can take a look at how we might redirect. And this is actually another topic that we can expand upon when it comes to the separation of concerns and how we reason about splitting the code. And that is redirections. What happens when this form submits successfully, who is responsible for the redirection, and also usually sign-up forms have another button called login, and that button redirects the user to the login page and vice versa. So let's briefly talk about redirection and then wrap things up. Hopefully you're still with me. If you are, by the way, if you reach this point, wow, I just realized it took me like 3 hours or more to recall this. So hopefully this was useful. Thank you for being here. If you're actually still watching, if you haven't liked and subscribed, I don't know what you're still doing here if you're not gonna come later and see my next videos. So please subscribe, please like and share this with your friends. Where was I? Yeah. So let's take a look at routing and how we handle navigation and that sort of concerns. On successful registration, we no longer need to show this form, basically. So what we can do is here, when we successfully submit it, we can use the redirection system provided by our application layer. In my case, with Next.js, it's going to be a use router from, next router. So I can take that out from the import and use it on to the page. And then here I can say router maybe replace, and let's go to the home page. Pretty simple, pretty neat. Let's see if it works. So I'll pick a user again. I think I need more characters. I submit, and then I see the hello world sign up. I didn't like the fact that for a brief moment of time, I still saw the register ready. So one way to quickly solve that is to just add a small little timeout at the end. Probably a little bit hacky, but yeah, I'll allow it. I don't mind. It's gonna get cleared anyway when we leave the page, so maybe have a second is enough to just make sure that it doesn't, it never goes back to showing the register button as clickable. So now when we go back, we can go back because we use the replace, so we need to type in the sign up URL again, 123456 12345 register, and there we go. We are onto the home page. That's all well and good, but what about the login button? What about that message and that button that you see? Oh, are you already a user? Sign in. How do we handle that in a way that respects the separation of concerns that we have so far? So right now the sign up page kind of has too many concerns, but there's still kind of application related, and then there's the form that has absolutely no application knowledge. It just receives props. So the login button exists in the sign up form, so let's add it there. However, the URL and the ideas and the architectural constraints of the navigation system don't belong here. For those of you that don't know, with Next.js, you need to have links like link href sign up. So if we have a link coming from next link into the sign up page, not sign up page, sign up form, sorry, we are not able to use our form anywhere else unless it's a Next.js application. That's a no-go in my book. So how do we allow links like this one to make their behavior, to enable their behavior in our form without actually importing them and knowing about them in the form? You might have guessed it, it's probably with additional props. But for now, let's add it right here. Let's add the button. Let's add the login here and see how it looks. And let's see if this can be a secondary, or what options do we have. So we have primary and secondary. Let's do secondary. Secondary. And if I go back to sign up, I see this login. If I click it, it's still gonna submit, which is not that great if you ask me, and it has absolutely no link. So what's one thing that we can do? Well, one thing is on click, we can prevent default. So let's do just that. and see if we still trigger the validation. So now we're no longer triggering the validation. That's useful to know. And what about the link? Well, if we have this button onto the sign up form, we kind of need to have the link there as well. One option is to allow something called maybe a props suffix and allow the parent to place whatever the parent wants after this particular button. So it's kind of gonna be like a slot, if you will, from other frameworks. So we can do suffix, and here I always forget what's the type. I think it's React element or something like that. Let's see if this works. I'm not entirely sure if it will. Import button, and it magically works. Wow. If we go onto the page, we still have the same behavior. It's just that now the sign up form is not responsible for the login button. It just allows the login button to exist there. So there's nothing stopping us now into this sign up page from using a link, because links are a responsibility of the application layer and pages are an application layer entity. So I think we can use a link just like that. And if not, we might be able to get around this limitation. Let's just make sure we imported the right thing. So no, not the link from React Daisy UI, the link from Next.js. And now if I click it, still nothing happens. Of course, nothing happens because we're actually still using the sign up as the URL. So we actually need to change it to login. I think we can also go ahead and remove the event listener, because the link itself will do that kind of prevention for us. And if we create a page similar to index, but for login, we should be good to go. Log in and just log in, like so. And let's take a look. So sign up goes to login. There's the page, click login, we are on login, we click back, we click back, we see the sign up page. Let's do a quick recap of what we have done today. We have a form, we have validation, we have cross-field validation, we are disabling the field, the submit button when we're submitting. We have server-side errors integrated, and we see how we can propagate individual fields, as well as we see how we can integrate application layer components inside our form. So we saw the login form, the login button, and how that can link to a different form or page. We've split the components, the page into at least 3 components. So we have a text field that we're using across the board. We have a sign up form, which only knows about the validation, the local things, the presentation layer, and so on. And we have the sign up page that knows everything. This is actually the last component that we could split, but in the interest of time, and since it's not related to separation of concerns, this video is more related to forms, we're not going to do that. But there's places that we can improve upon in this page, in this component. So we could extract the API into an API layer. We can even split the page into 2 separate components, one that only knows about the application, the Next.js application capabilities, and one that knows about our API endpoints and so on. But that is a topic for another time. What is important is that our sign up form, it is modular. It only knows about the client side concerns of the form, and it allows through extension for parent components that are more knowledgeable to inject stuff that is not supposed to exist in the form, like a link from the Next.js library. Oh wow, we're actually done. It actually took a lot longer than I expected. I hope this was useful for you. Leave a comment and let me know what you thought about what we talked today. If there's something that I could do to improve or that could make those videos better, that's also welcome. And I hope you subscribe and that you come back and check out the next video.